I don't talk about this much. Even now, saying it out loud, it feels like stirring up cold ashes. My name is Evelyn. And for a long, long time, I believed that being the responsible one, well, that it meant something. That loyalty was a shield. But when the ground finally vanished beneath my feet, it wasn't some loud, dramatic collapse. It was quiet, like watching your own reflection fade from a mirror, little by little, until you're just gone. If you've ever poured your heart and soul into people who just took, maybe you'll understand this. Because what they never ever saw coming was the day I finally stopped pouring. It was a Saturday, one of those crisp October mornings. I was over at my parents' place, the house I'd practically grown up in twice. Once as a kid, and again as the adult who kept it from falling apart. I was in the sunroom, this little glassed-in space off the kitchen that was always either too hot or too cold. Dad, Robert, had asked me to help him digitize some old family photos and documents. He'd always said, "Evelyn, you're the tech whiz," even though my career was in healthcare administration, a world away from IT. He just never quite got the hang of anything more complicated than the TV remote. He'd left a pile of papers on the worn wicker table. Old insurance policies, some of Mom's recipes, faded birthday cards. I was sorting through them, making neat little stacks, the whir of the ancient desktop fan a steady drone in the background. Then I saw it. A manila folder, a bit thicker than the rest, labeled in my mother Susan's careful, looping script, "Estate Plan Final." My breath just hitched. I shouldn't have looked. I know that. A part of me, the part that always followed the rules, screamed not to. But just the week before, I'd quietly paid their overdue property taxes, nearly $3,000. And I had their prescription refills sitting in my purse, ready for my usual Monday drop-off at the pharmacy. So yeah, I opened it. Inside, crisp and official, was their will, notarized just 2 months prior. The house, the one I'd sunk so much of my own money into keeping afloat, fully paid off. Their remaining retirement funds, a modest life insurance policy. Every single asset, every last dime, was to go to my brother Leo. Leo, who was 31, living in their basement, and whose longest-held job was a 6-month stint at a coffee shop 3 years ago. He was perpetually finding himself, or on the verge of a breakthrough, with some new online venture that never quite launched. My name, Evelyn Hayes, appeared exactly once. A single sterile line. We love both our children, Evelyn and Leo, equally, and trust them to support one another in accordance with their means. That was it. No acknowledgement of the thousands I'd spent on emergency repairs, the furnace I'd replaced one bitter January, the countless times I'd covered their bills when their fixed income fell short. Nothing. Just a polite, almost clinical dismissal. A way of saying, "You're fine, you don't need this, and we don't owe you a thing for all you've done." I just stood there, the papers cool against my fingertips. The fan whirred on. My hands surprisingly were steady. My breathing? Not so much. It felt shallow, tight in my chest. Robert wandered back and then, a chipped mug of coffee in his hand. "Making progress, Ev?" he asked, cheerful, oblivious. I held up the folder. My voice, when it came, was quiet. Too quiet. "Dad, what is this?" He froze. The mug stopped halfway to his lips. Then he let out this long, slow sigh. The kind that says, "I knew this was coming. I just hoped it wouldn't be today." "Now, Evelyn, it's not what you think," he started, his eyes darting away from mine. I didn't say anything, 'cause it was exactly what I thought. I didn't need to press. He just stood there, cradling that coffee cup like it held the answers to the universe. Then he mumbled it, the line I'd heard a variation of my whole life. We figured you'd understand. You're Evelyn. You always land on your feet. You always land on your feet." Their get-to-fail-free card for every time they leaned too hard, took too much, or just plain forgot I had my own life, my own needs. It meant, "You're strong, so you don't get to be hurt. You're capable, so you don't get to want." I placed the folder gently back on the wicker table, and walked out into the small backyard. The old wooden bench I'd built with him one summer years ago creaked when I sat down. I'd replaced the rotting slats on that bench myself just last spring. Same month the garage door opener died, and I'd paid for a new one because Leo was, yet again, between opportunities. Back then I hadn't really minded, or maybe I just convinced myself I didn't. I was raised to be the fixer, the one who stepped up without being asked. I grew up in that house, shared a tiny bedroom with Leo until I was nearly 14, when Dad finally got around to finishing a small room in the basement for him. I still remembered the three of us, Mom, Dad, and me, painting my new room a hopeful shade of yellow. Leo had complained it was too bright. Mom had brought in cookies and called us her little helpers. Some helpers. I'd stayed in our hometown after college, even though a great job offer was waiting for me in Chicago, more money, a clear path to advancement. But Mom Susan had cried, said she wouldn't sleep knowing I was so far away. I told myself family came first. They never explicitly asked me to sacrifice those things. They just never told me it wasn't expected. They let my loyalty become their convenience. There were the small things, so numerous they blurred together. Covering their car insurance when money was tight, picking up extra groceries when their budget didn't stretch, spending hours on the phone with utility companies sorting out billing errors. And the big things like the $12,000 I'd wired from my emergency fund 5 years back to stop a threatened lien on the house when Robert's part-time consulting work dried up. I did it without a word, without them even asking directly. I just saw the panic in Mom's eyes and made the call. I just wanted them to feel safe, secure, not to worry. And now, after all of it, I was a footnote, a platitude about mutual support. I sat on that bench, staring at the gnarled apple tree at the edge of the yard. Leo had carved his initials into it when he was a teenager, H.S.P. for some girl he dated for 2 months. I wondered if he'd ever offered to pay for it to be pruned, or for the fungicide it needed every spring. I wondered if he even knew it cost nearly $600 last year when a storm had threatened to split the main trunk. Did they ever once stop and think about what I'd given up? Not just the money, but the opportunities, the ease, the sheer mental space I could have had if I wasn't constantly anticipating their next crisis? Or did they just see me as Evelyn, the endlessly reliable, the one who didn't need asking because she always showed up, checkbook or toolbox in hand? I didn't go back inside right away. The bench creaked again, then settled. I could hear the low hum of the television through the kitchen window. A few minutes later, the back door opened and Susan stepped out. She was wearing that faded lavender cardigan, the one she always wore when she had something difficult to say. The one I'd given her for Mother's Day 3 years ago, when Leo had given her a half-dead potted plant he'd forgotten on his windowsill. She'd said she loved both gifts equally. She didn't sit down at first, just stood there, her hands twisting the hem of her sleeve. Her gardening gloves were tucked into her pocket, earth still clinging to them. "Evelyn," she said, her voice not too soft, not too sharp, just wary. I didn't look up. I kept my gaze fixed on that apple tree. She sat beside me anyway, a little too close. The familiar scent of her rose-scented hand lotion. "We didn't mean for you to find out like that, sweetie." I nodded once, a tiny movement. I wasn't going to make this easy for her. I wasn't going to fill the silence. She let out a small breath, not quite a sigh, more like a release of held tension. "It's not that we don't love you. You know that." Still I said nothing. Because what do you call love that conveniently forgets your contributions when it's time to divide the so-called legacy? She reached over then, her hand resting lightly on mine. Her skin felt thin, papery, and there was a slight tremor in her touch. Leo's just had a much rougher go of things. He needs more support. You're so steady, you always have been. Steady, strong, reliable, capable. Words that sound like compliments until you realize they're the bars of a cage. Labels that give people permission to take and take without a shred of guilt because you can handle it. I gently pulled my hand away. You could have told me, I said. My voice was low, even surprisingly devoid of the storm raging inside me. You could have at least been honest about it. She looked away, down towards the overgrown vegetable patch. And that's when she said it, so quietly I almost didn't hear it, as if whispering the words would lessen their impact. We had to co-sign for Leo, for that new app idea he has. He needed a substantial investment to get it off the ground. The words landed softly like a feather, but the weight behind them was crushing. They hadn't just written me out of a future inheritance. They'd already tethered their present, their financial stability, to my brother's latest pipe dream. With real money, real debt, real risk. How much? I asked. My voice was flat. No answer. She just kept staring at the wilting tomato plants. Mom, how much did you co-sign for? Still nothing. Just the buzz of a late season bee near the fading sunflowers. Then, barely audible, 40,000. I stood up then. The late afternoon breeze had picked up, rustling the leaves in the apple tree. The little wind chime Dad had hung from the eaves years ago tinkled faintly, then fell silent. I looked at her, really looked at her. Not with anger, not anymore. Just with a profound, bone-deep weariness. You didn't choose him because he needed it more, Mom, I said, the truth of it settling heavy and cold in my own heart. You chose him because you were already on the hook for him. You just didn't factor in the cost of forgetting me in the process. Her eyes widened, a flicker of something, surprise? Guilt? In their depths. But I wasn't looking for a defense or an apology. I finally understood. The price of their peace of mind had always been my own, and I'd been paying it for far too long. I didn't text. I didn't call. I didn't make a scene. I just stopped. That week, I logged into my online banking and canceled the automatic monthly transfer I'd set up years ago to cover their internet and cable bundle. I deleted the recurring calendar reminder to call in their pharmacy refills. I paused the shared streaming account that I paid for, the one Leo used more than anyone. Nothing dramatic. No grand pronouncements. Just a quiet turning off of the taps. An empty space where my constant, unquestioning support used to be. I thought they'd notice immediately, but a full week went by. Silence. Then, the second week, the first little drip started. Robert's text came first. Hey Ev, the smart thermostat seems to be on the fritz again. Flickering display. Can you take a look when you're over next? I didn't answer. Then from Susan. Sweetie, we're all out of those special digestive tea bags you always get for your father. Leo was supposed to grab them, but you know Leo. I left it unread. They weren't alarmed. Not yet. They probably just figured I was swamped at work. Or maybe a little moody. Needed some space. They probably thought, oh, Evelyn will come around. She always does. The third week, the tone shifted. A text from Susan. Evelyn, the HOA fees are overdue. The notice came today. Can you handle it like you usually do? She didn't say hello. Didn't ask how I was. Just a demand disguised as a routine request. A need. I stared at that message for a long time, the screen glowing in the dim light of my living room. Then I typed back a single sentence. You'll need to ask Leo. It's his inheritance you're trying to protect, after all. I hit send. I didn't even wait for the little delivered notification. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. Susan. I let it go to voicemail. Another message popped up immediately. Please, Evelyn. Don't be like this. We need to talk about this. But there was nothing left to talk about, was there? They'd made their decision loud and clear, in black and white on that notarized paper. I was just finally living as if that decision had consequences. That evening, Leo chimed in. A text, casual, almost bored. Ev, come on. Don't make this a whole thing. Just sort it out for them like always. Like always. Like I was a household appliance. Reliable. Uncomplaining. expected to function on demand, like I was never anything more than a predictable part of the background scenery of their lives. I typed back, "They put their faith and their finances in you, Leo. Time to be the man they believe you are." He didn't reply. The next morning, I woke up to a money transfer request from Susan through our banking app. $2,800. The exact amount of the overdue HOA fees plus the late penalties. No message attached. No polite request. Just the number. I declined it. A minute later, my phone rang. Susan again. I silenced it. It rang again. Robert this time. Silenced. Then the text started flooding in. From Susan. "Evelyn, we could lose the house if you don't help us. Please." And finally from Robert, blunt and accusatory. "You'd really let your parents become homeless over this? After everything we've done for you?" I almost laughed. Homeless? They weren't homeless. They were just uncomfortable. For the very first time, they were experiencing the financial insecurity I'd been quietly shielding them from for years. They were learning firsthand the weight of the burdens I'd carried without a word of complaint. I turned off my phone's notifications. They hadn't lost me when they wrote me out of their will. No, they'd lost me long before that. They lost me every time they assumed I would just keep giving, keep fixing, keep showing up no matter how little they offered in return. They lost me when they took my loyalty for granted, and then were shocked when it finally ran dry. After I declined that transfer request, a week of silence descended. No calls, no texts, no emails. It was the quietest I'd known them to be in years. And somehow that silence felt louder, more significant than all their previous pleading. I started sleeping through the night again, waking up without that knot of anxiety in my stomach, without the immediate urge to check my phone for the latest crisis. I cooked meals just for myself, simple things, and ate them in peace. But silence in my family never lasted. Not when there was blame to be assigned, or sympathy to be solicited. The first little tremor was a voicemail from my Aunt Carol. She rarely called me directly. She always said she didn't like to get in the middle of things. But her message that morning was carefully neutral. "Evelyn, honey, it's Aunt Carol. Listen, I'm not taking sides in whatever is going on, but your mother called me and she's worried sick. Maybe you could just talk to them?" That's when I knew. They'd started their campaign, broadening the narrative. I opened Facebook, something I rarely did anymore. It didn't take long to find it. A post from Susan. A slightly blurry photo of the front porch of their house, the roses I'd planted for her a few years back looking a bit neglected. The caption read, "We gave everything we had to our children. We loved them with all our hearts. But sometimes even all your love isn't enough to ensure they'll be there for you." Dozens of sympathetic emojis. A few concerned comments from distant relatives and old family friends. One from Leo, of course. "Some people only think about themselves and money. They forget that family is about showing up for each other, no matter what. Mom and Dad deserve so much better." I closed the app. I wasn't angry, not really. Just hollow. A cold, empty space where my outrage should have been. They weren't just disappointed or hurt. They were actively rewriting history, recasting me from the lifelong caretaker into the heartless villain. All because I'd finally stopped enabling them, stopped being their perpetual safety net. The next afternoon, a plain white envelope was tucked into my condo's mailbox. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper. A photocopy of a foreclosure notice. Not addressed to me, of course, but I recognized the property address instantly. It was their house. I sat with it for a long moment, just staring at the stark official language. Notice of default and intent to accelerate. I flipped it over. On the blank back, I almost wrote, "Maybe you should have left the house to someone who actually knew how to manage finances." But I didn't. What was the point? Instead, I went to my laptop and pulled up the county registrar's website. Their property was officially listed as at risk. multiple missed payments. No buffer left. They must have burned through whatever savings they had, probably trying to keep up appearances, hoping I'd cave before things got this dire. Or maybe Leo had already blown through any accessible funds with his app idea. All that money they'd earmarked for his security, his stability, his future gone. There was a time not so long ago when a notice like this would have sent me into a panic. I would have been on the phone with the bank immediately, negotiating a payment plan, trying to arrange a deferral, scrambling to move funds from my own accounts. But now? I poured myself a glass of water, sat at my small kitchen table, and just let it be. Sometimes you don't need to light the match to watch a rotten structure burn. Sometimes all you have to do is stop carrying the water. It started subtly on social media, then escalated. A vague post from Susan, accompanied by a picture of a wilting sunflower. We tried to raise them with love and teach them what truly matters. We did our best. But sometimes even your best isn't enough when hearts grow cold. No names, no direct accusations, but the implication was clear enough for anyone who knew our family. Aunt Trish, Mom's cousin, commented, "You and Robert are such wonderful, giving parents. You deserve nothing but loyalty and respect." A day or two later, Robert followed up. A much longer post, far less subtle. "We poured everything we had into our children. Our time, our money, our unwavering love. We thought we raised them with strong moral values, to understand duty and family. But in the end, you learn the hard way that you can't control who decides to turn their back on you when you need them most." He tagged me in the post. No phone call, no private message asking to talk. Just a public shaming, for all our extended family and acquaintances to see. I didn't respond. I just watched it unfold. Dozens of likes. Comments pouring in from people I hadn't seen since high school. From relatives I barely knew. One cousin twice removed wrote, "This younger generation just doesn't understand sacrifice or gratitude." And then there was Leo. Of course there was Leo. He shared Robert's post with his own sanctimonious caption. "It's heartbreaking to see my parents so hurt. Some people only care about family when they're getting something out of it. I would do absolutely anything to protect Mom and Dad. I guess not everyone sees family loyalty the same way." I read it. Then I read it again. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it. This was the same man who hadn't paid a dime in rent for over a decade, who had systematically drained their limited resources, who had stood by and watched their financial security crumble. And now he was painting himself as the devoted, sacrificial son. The comments under his share were even worse. "Leo, you're such a good son. Your sister should be ashamed of herself. They gave her everything, a good upbringing, and this is how she repays them? She just sounds selfish and greedy." They didn't know the truth, of course. But they didn't want the truth. They wanted a simple story with clear heroes and villains. And my family was more than happy to serve one up, with me cast in the starring role of the ungrateful deserter. I might have still said nothing, let the digital storm rage and eventually blow itself out. But then I saw her name. Sarah. My cousin Sarah. The one who years ago during a different family drama had pulled me aside and said, "Evelyn, you're the glue that holds this crazy family together. Don't ever forget that." She'd liked Robert's post. And under Leo's share, she'd left a single supportive heart emoji. No words. Just that. It hit me harder than all the other comments combined. Maybe because I'd always thought Sarah saw things clearly. Maybe because, for a fleeting moment, I'd believed she actually saw me, the real me, not just the role I played. I closed my laptop. I sat there in the growing darkness of my living room, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something inside me actually break. Not a loud, messy shattering, just a quiet final click. Like a locked tumbler falling definitively into place. They weren't just rewriting the story to make themselves look better. They were actively, deliberately trying to erase me from it, to nullify every sacrifice, every act of love, every quiet rescue. They came on a Thursday. I suppose I should have expected it. The text hadn't worked. The ignored money requests had yielded nothing. The public guilt trip on social media had, from their perspective, failed to produce the desired result. So they escalated. They showed up. The call came from Maria, the sweet woman who volunteered at the front desk of the community center, where I spent my Thursday mornings helping seniors navigate the baffling world of smartphones and online bill pay. It was 10:42 a.m. Evelyn. Maria's voice was hesitant. There's a Robert and Susan Hayes here to see you. And a younger man, he says he's Leo, your brother? I was standing in the narrow hallway just outside the small classroom we used, the cheerful chatter of my current student, Mrs. Henderson, drifting through the open door. I stared at the scuffed linoleum floor tiles while Maria kept talking. They're asking to come back. They said it's very urgent. I took a slow, steadying breath. Maria, I said, my voice calm, please tell them I'm in a session right now and I'm not available. And also that they weren't expected. Pause on her end. Okay. They said they'll wait. I nodded, though of course she couldn't see it. Then let them wait. 20 minutes later, as I was patiently explaining to Mr. Galliano how to attach a photo to an email, my phone, set to silent in my bag, buzzed. A text from Susan. We're in the lobby, Evelyn. We need to see you. Another followed a minute later. We are not leaving until we talk to you. I didn't rush. I finished my session with Mr. Galliano, answered 2 quick emails that couldn't wait, and then collected my bag and walked calmly down the main stairs to the community center's small, usually quiet lobby. They were there, huddled near the entrance, looking entirely out of place amidst the brightly colored flyers for yoga classes and pottery workshops. They stood a little too close together, like a beleaguered unit bracing for impact. Robert, stiff and upright, his jaw set, radiating disapproval. Susan, clutching her oversized handbag with both hands, her eyes darting around nervously. And Leo, slouched against the wall, looking like he'd rather be literally anywhere else on earth. They all turned as one when I stepped off the last stair. For a moment no one spoke. The only sound was the hum of the old soda machine in the corner. I stayed where I was, a few feet away, my arms crossed loosely, waiting. Susan spoke first, her voice already tight with an edge I knew well. Evelyn, we need to talk. I looked at her, then my gaze flickered to Robert, then to Leo, then back to Susan. The street outside the glass doors was quiet. A delivery truck rumbled past in the distance. I didn't answer her. Robert cleared his throat, a sound full of impatience. You'd really let us lose the house over this? This stubbornness? I let his words hang in the air for a beat. Then quietly, and you really thought I wouldn't? After everything? He opened his mouth, probably to deliver some well-rehearsed lecture on filial duty, but I cut him off, my voice still low but firm. You wrote me out. You dismissed years of my support, my money, my time as if it meant nothing. You handed everything and the responsibility for your future to Leo. And now you're standing here in my space, demanding the very same support I gave you willingly for years, support you never once truly acknowledged until it was gone. No one responded. The air crackled with unspoken accusations. Susan stepped forward, her voice softer now, pleading. We thought you'd understand, sweetie. You've always been so strong, so capable. I nodded slowly. And you used that strength, that capability, as an excuse to forget me, to erase me from the equation until you needed something. Leo finally muttered something, head down, directed at his shoes. I didn't catch all of it, something about never asked for any of this pressure. But you took it, didn't you, Leo? I said, my eyes meeting his for the first time. He looked away quickly. You took the promise of the inheritance. You took the co-signed loan. You took, and you never once seemed to question it. Robert's hands were on his hips now, his face reddening. We fed you. We raised you. You owe us something for that. I almost laughed then, a bitter, humorless sound. I paid that debt, Robert. I paid it every month when I covered your bills. I paid it every year when I fixed what was broken in your house. I paid it with interest over and over again. And you erased me from the ledger anyway. Susan's lower lip began to tremble. A tear traced a path down her cheek. We didn't mean to hurt you, Evelyn. We never ever meant for any of this to hurt you. I took one small step closer, enough to lower my voice even more so only they could hear. Then why did you wait until I disappeared completely to realize I was the one holding everything up? Why did it take my absence for you to finally see my presence? They said nothing. Just stood there, three people who had once constituted the entirety of my world. Leo, looking defeated, reached for the door handle as if to leave. I held up a hand, a simple stopping gesture. Don't. You're not coming up to my apartment. You're not coming into my life to demand more. I won't be your solution this time. I won't be your scapegoat, and I won't be your savior. No yelling. No dramatic scene. Just a profound, unshakable stillness. They stood there frozen. Three people who had once called themselves my family. My mother, my father, my brother. And I was finally unequivocally done. Done trying to earn their love. Done trying to be seen by people who only ever seemed to look my way when they needed something. They didn't lose me when they changed their will and wrote my name out of their future. They lost me piece by piece over years of taking, of assuming, of believing that my well of loyalty and support would never ever run dry. They lost me when they truly believed I'd never find the strength to walk away. I didn't block their numbers. I didn't need to. The silence I offered them was far more absolute, more impenetrable than any digital barrier. They texted for a little while after that day at the community center. Susan tried soft words, appeals to nostalgia, gentle guilt. Robert's messages were colder, tinged with anger, full of blame and clipped demands. Leo, predictably, stayed mostly quiet, just one last sullen message a few days later. You think this makes you better than us? Just walking away like this? I didn't answer. What was there to say? A few weeks later, on a blustery November afternoon, I took a long walk. No particular destination in mind, just a need for movement, for crisp air in my lungs. My path, almost without conscious thought, curved through the older part of town, past the neighborhood where I grew up. The old street looked mostly the same, familiar houses, cracked sidewalks, a fence someone had started painting and never finished. And then there it was. Their house. Or what used to be their house. A stark utilitarian for sale by bank sign was pounded into the Browning lawn. The shutters, once a cheerful blue, looked faded and askew. The grass was overgrown and patchy. I stood on the public sidewalk across the street and just looked at it. The porch light was off. The wooden garden bench I'd built, the one where Mom and I had that last awful conversation, was gone. So was the little wind chime that used to hang by the door. I didn't move any closer. I didn't need to see inside to know what had finally collapsed under the weight of neglect and bad decisions. That house, it had never really kept me safe. All those years I had been the one keeping it standing, and now it was someone else's problem, or someone else's opportunity. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed in my coat pocket. Once, then again. I didn't need to pull it out. I already knew the names that would be on the screen. I let it buzz a third time, then stop. A moment later, it buzzed again, a new voicemail notification. I knew. I muted the phone, slipped it back deep into my pocket. No message was needed. I already knew everything it would say. I walked home in the cold, clear air of that late autumn afternoon. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel vindicated or triumphant. Mostly I just felt light, free. I was never their backup plan, not really. They just liked to pretend, for their own comfort, that I'd never find the courage to leave the role they'd written for me. This journey, it wasn't about revenge in the way most people think. It was about reclaiming my own story, my own peace. It was about realizing that true strength isn't just about how much you can endure, but about knowing when to stop, when to choose yourself, even if it means walking away from everything you've ever known. It's the quiet dignity in finally letting go. If this story hit close to home for you, if you've ever felt unseen or undervalued by the people who should have cherished you most, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. I do read them all. Sometimes just knowing you're not alone in these experiences can be a powerful step toward healing. If you found some strength or understanding in my story, please consider subscribing to TK Revenge Story for more narratives like this. And if you feel moved to support the channel through super thanks, please know that your generosity is deeply appreciated. Sometimes giving on our own terms can be a part of the healing too. Thank you for listening.